This is what you call a washcloth. We all have these in our homes and generally in our bathrooms. They're in your showers or your tubs. And of course, when you're not using them, they're clean and folded, right? In some closet somewhere. I bring this up today because we're having a debate over what constitutes torture. Some liberals and Democrats in the United States say that something called waterboarding is equivalent to what people used to do when they were boiled in oil in the Middle Ages. Well, let's consider this for a moment. Why do I have this washcloth out today? Well, if you think the term waterboarding, think about that for just a moment. What does that actually mean? Does that mean that you're tied to a board and then you're dipped beneath the water until you can no longer hold your breath? And then just before you're about to drown, you're pulled to the surface and you're asked to confess whatever sin you may have committed? Well, that would sound about right when you hear the term waterboarding. Maybe I'm misinformed, but I've been told that it simply is this: a washcloth, perhaps not quite like this, but a cloth is placed over the face of a suspected terrorist, and then water is poured over this cloth. The terrorist then has difficulty breathing because of the wet cloth over the nose, and that simulates drowning. But at no point is this individual ever in any danger of drowning. Well, compare that to the notion that you're actually tying someone to a plank and dunking them beneath the water. It doesn't seem anywhere near as egregious as that description when you hear that name waterboarding in your head. Let's also take a look at this from the standpoint of what's going on since this so-called torture memo or report was released by the U.S. Senate this week. We have Russia, Iran, and China criticizing the United States and using it, of course, for public relations to claim that our system is far worse than anything they actually have. Did you know that in Russia, when they're trying to get information out of someone, what they often do is they wrap that individual in a tight canvas? In other words, like a bodysuit. This will run from your shoulders all the way down to your toes. Then you are dipped in a vat of water up to your neck. Your head is still free so that you can breathe and you can speak. But over time, as that canvas absorbs that water, it starts to constrict. And it starts to constrict along your ribs and along your chest and compresses your chest, making it more difficult to breathe. This has been common since the Soviet era, and the Russians apparently don't believe that that happens to be torture. In Iran, the Islamic Revolution took place in the late 1970s in reaction to some of the sins of the Shah of Iran. The Shah, of course, long dead and long deposed. It was said that in order to extract information from people that were his enemies, he would have them tied into a chair and then nails would be driven into their skulls. Or that an oven would be set up. The floor of the oven would be actually just a normal cold or cool piece of metal, but this oven would be so small that persons put inside it would have to squat. But then the walls and the roof of the oven would be superheated. And when you became tired and you could no longer stand or squat in that one position, and you leaned or you tried to stand up, you would be severely burned. Well, the folks of the Islamic faith said that that was wrong, and I think in this case I would agree with them. But ever since they managed to win control of that country, they've continued those practices. They also like to take a pair of tweezers and pull eyes out of people's foreheads. It doesn't sound to me that that is anything near comparable to a washcloth. This is a washcloth that would be placed over your face and someone would pour a glass of water over it. Tell me, is it comparable to someone plucking your eyes out with a pair of tweezers? One of the other tortures that I've heard about that take place in Iranian jails, they like to take an individual, hang that individual from a wall with that individual's feet in water. And then electrodes are attached to the private parts of the man or woman, and then those are fired up. That electricity. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a football player many, many years ago, there were the occasions on the football field where I got hit in that area. It was excruciating. I can't imagine what it would be like to actually have someone running voltage through there while your feet were being dunked in water. This takes place in Iran, and the government there believes it's okay and sanctioned by God. The Chinese, who knows? Are they pulling out people's fingernails? My guess is Chinese prisons are nowhere that you would want to find yourself. How about North Korea? Now, it has been said that no one could ever verify it, but you may remember that the current leader of that country, the pudgy one, with a bad haircut, It was said that one of his uncles had been tried for treason, and that the uncle was then executed. There were reports coming out that he had been tossed to a pack of wild dogs, and the dogs had torn the man apart. Now, we haven't been able to verify that. Many people say it's likely not true. But when you think about North Korea, it probably could be quite plausible. This, on the other hand, is a washcloth placed over a face, and a glass of water is poured across it. Did you know that in British Kenya, long before Kenya managed to win its freedom, and we've often heard stories about what it was like there when Barack Obama's father was growing up. It was part of the British Empire, and there was an uprising by many of the local tribes. One was called, I believe, Mau Mau's. They were trying to win their liberty, or at least get out from under the British boot heel. Well, the British had a method for dealing with these people, and you know the British right now are claiming that their American cousins are crude. They do nothing but sit around and complain about us and how we just aren't as sophisticated as they are. Well, the British, and I read this in a magazine article many years ago, some British officers say it's true that this really happened. They used to boil eggs. Now, a hot-boiled egg, when you pull it out of the pan, if you grip it in your hand, you'll understand that the heat is going to be radiating from that, and it's going to be there for quite some time before that egg cools off. The British interrogators, they would take those eggs out of the boiling pan, and they would place them in the rectums of some of the Mau Mau's, and one of the officers bragged about how that got the Mau Mau's to confess whatever they were up to. Seems to me, compared to a washcloth placed over a face and then some water poured atop it, is somewhat of a minor comparison. How about the Belgians in Congo? Now, this, of course, is nothing to do with our modern Belgian state, but at a time, or there was a time, when the Belgians, in order to oppress the people who lived in that particular country in the center of Africa, that they would have the hands of people chopped off. And that was evidence that the people were doing their jobs in the Belgian military by the number of hands they could collect and bring in. So let's try to put all of this in context. Your country, your government, may be doing something that could be considered a little unseemly. This is a washcloth, and it's placed over someone's face, and water is then poured atop this washcloth. Now you tell me, how does that compare to what the rest of the world is doing? It may not be nice, but no one out there seems to me to have the ability to do any complaining about what is taking place in the secret services of the United States of America. Hope to see you all at Christmas when I come out of the shadows myself, and perhaps I'll be doing a little scrubbing with a washcloth just to make myself look pretty before I do that. God bless.